Welcome to another episode of Don't Panic Geocacher. My name is Aryan. I go by WhatIfN5 on the geocaching.com website, and I'm here to talk and help you solve mystery caches. Today's episode is called Step by Step, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about a technique that I use quite a bit when solving mystery caches, and that is trying to solve other puzzles of the CO. So I'm going to explain that. I'm going to use some examples here of how I learned that, and I got permission from another cache owner to uh, use his puzzles to help you explain this concept. So when solving mystery caches, you might end up with just one that you want to solve because it's near a location that you're going, or it's one maybe nearby where you live that you would like to solve. But that puzzle might be more difficult than some of the other puzzles of the cache owner. So a good technique is to go to the cache owner's cache page and see what other mystery caches that they've published. Because similar like with everything in life, people fall into certain patterns. They use certain techniques maybe over and over, or they start maybe with a simpler version of a puzzle and publish a more difficult puzzle later on that might use a similar technique. So, by solving other puzzles of the cache owner, you may actually better understand how they rate caches, maybe which websites they use to encode or decode certain ciphers, but also which ciphers they like or kind of like their mindset. Are they lateral thinkers? Are they more science oriented? So, are they fans of metal music? All that may help you solve other puzzles. So, the more you understand the cache owner, the better it, it might help you solving other puzzles. So, this is something that I recommend doing is that when you're stuck on a puzzle, don't start with the most difficult one of the CO. Actually, look at some of the simpler ones first, and then see if the cache owner maybe helps you solve the more difficult ones by teaching you step by step some of their techniques. So I'm going to use a very clear example of that. So my thanks here to History Joe 23, a cache owner in Tennessee. He has a lot of mystery caches published, and these mystery caches go from rather straightforward to very complicated. So several of them are series, but also cross series. There's several things you can learn that will help you solve mystery caches. There's techniques that are used in various places, and once you start to understand them, it actually will help you solve many more of them. Individually, especially the hardest one might be harder to solve, but sometimes you suddenly see a pattern in one, and then you can apply that to several other puzzles, in this case of History Geo. So he has given me explicit permission to use these caches for this video, so I'm not spoiling anything that the cache owner doesn't want to be spoiled. So my thanks for that, because I think especially the series that I'm going to talk about, the Pyramid series, are a good example where other caches in the series or other caches the cache owner has published may help you solve the overall series. And especially in this case, solving with the most difficult one won't get you anywhere, but starting with the simplest one they will gradually get more difficult. So let's take a look at this series. It's a series of 10 geocaches that are all named after pyramid and then with Roman numerals from 1 to 10. So you see that right here. And so this is the GC code 9RFYV. And as I mentioned, located in Tennessee. So they were published in 2022 and they were published over time. So we see here the base coordinates and it starts with a 3 difficulty. So even the first one is not a straightforward puzzle, and we'll see that right away. With the first one, I'll go a little bit more detail, but the same technique, base technique, is used for all of them. But I first wanted to explain the base technique behind the puzzle. What you see here on the cache page is this pyramid, hence the name of the puzzle with these numbers in there. This is actually a pretty common math problem or puzzle that you can solve, where you have to find out and fill in the entire pyramid with numbers. It's a bit like a Fibonacci tree of math, is that the two numbers below create the number above. So using simple subtraction, so if we take the top number and we subtract in this case the number to the right, we can calculate the left number. So these two numbers combined, if you add them, would create the number on the top. So this way you can fill in the entire pyramid. As long as you have a number on each row, you can calculate the pyramid up to that level. So we see that we have all the numbers up to this row, the 129 we have, but then on the bottom row we don't have anything, so we have to do something special there. So let's go look one further. So if we now have this number combined with 595, we can now calculate the next number, which is 832. And now we have 832, so we can calculate this number with that number that comes out of there. We have this number, and so on. We can calculate the entire pyramid up to this row. So when you do that, and we fill in the next number, so 920, you will end up at the end with this scenario. Now, all the X's are places where you know the number. I'm just not giving them away, just showing them that that is the part where you have answers. But here you would get stuck because you don't know what to do for the next row. And here you have to make an assumption, right? And the simple assumption here is to assume that this is the coordinates that will be shown here. So if we do that and we look at the posted coordinates here at the top, then we know it has to start with 36. So if we assume that this is 36, let's see what the next number would be. So 36, 61 minus 36 would be 25. That seems to nicely line up with the coordinates. And if we now do this for the entire row, because remember we have all the x's, we know what they are. If you calculate the entire pyramid, you will now get a nice coordinate and you will have the first puzzle solved. So I think that was a puzzle that well deserved the 3 difficulty rating, especially since we didn't have the last row. Now the next one looks to be slightly simpler because we have a number on each row. And as I mentioned, as long as you have a number on each row, this is solvable. So we can do the same math that we did before. So we start with the top number, we subtract this number, we get a new number here, and we can do that for the entire pyramid. If you do that, you will quickly find out that you end up at a problem here at the end, because if we do 100 and assume, for example, the coordinates again, so 36, then subtract that, you get 64 here. Well, 64 can't be the minutes because it only goes to 60. So clearly this can't be 36. So even if we solve the entire puzzle, over here I would not get something that at least would read a coordinate like that. That is because for all the puzzles, this is clearly the wrong part, for all the puzzles from 2 to 5, you have to solve the pyramid, but then you have to look at the end result. And the end result will still give you all the numbers of the coordinate, but maybe not in the order that you expect them. So not from left to right, but you have to do something else. So you don't have to manipulate or change any numbers, you just have to change the way you read them. So, for example, number 2, read them from right to left, and suddenly you will get good coordinates. But try other techniques like swapping numbers out and things like that. What ways can you vary the numbers of how you read them, that it will give you a good coordinate? And since you know the posted coordinates, it should be pretty straightforward once you have solved the pyramid of how to read the numbers. So now we have solved 2 to 5 as well, and we can take a look at the next one. Now we're going to take a look at number 6. And number 6 is where it makes a jump, but there is a hint. German monk. The first step is the same as all the other ones, where you have to solve the pyramid. We see all the numbers on each line. The numbers are getting smaller, so we're in good shape. We can solve the pyramid. However, after you've done that, you will notice that there is no clear way to read the coordinates. Can't look at the numbers and say like, oh, there is my 36 or my 35 and my 80 number that I need to get the coordinates. Then they won't be in there. So, but the German monk is a hint here, and actually the cache owner, either intentionally or unintentionally, has actually shown us what we need to do. Because around the same time, this is RZ80, RZ44 was published. And this one talks about, I'm going to call it Prometheus, um, is about another cipher. And this cipher talks about that it was published by a monk. Now remember, the other one had a hint as monk. So this is actually the solution to the other puzzle. Because if we look at this specific cipher, and we look up, for example, the Decode website, we can find some description. Then this is a cipher where each character or each number is incremented by more as you are encoding it. So for encoding, we have to add numbers. That means to decode, we have to subtract numbers. So here you see what the cipher does. Each one shifts one more in the alphabet. Well, our alphabet are here the numbers 0 to 9. So we have to shift them within that alphabet. So with 3, we shift 0, so that stays at 3. 4, we shift, but now shift back, so basically subtract. And now it becomes a 3. 7 minus 2 is 5. 2 minus 3, well, that would be a negative number. So we can kind of read that as 12 minus 3 is 9, and so on. And that would give us the entire decryption of what the cipher is. So this is a specific cipher where the key is kind of hard-coded. It's a bit like a Vigenère cipher with a hard-coded key where each one shifts one more than the previous one until you're at the end of the alphabet, and then you basically repeat that pattern. So this is what you have to do with the outcome of this puzzle. So in other words, when we look back at pyramid number 6 with the German monk, at the end you get a series of numbers. You apply the cipher that we just found, learned from the cache owner from another puzzle, and we now apply that to this puzzle, and we have a solution. That brings us to puzzle number 7. And in puzzle number 7, we again get a pyramid. All the numbers, all the lines of the pyramid, all the rows of the pyramid have a number, so that is good. But there's also something that on the cache page that tells us, no, there are no negative numbers in this puzzle. You could actually make this puzzle with negative numbers. It actually would work. Somewhat surprised the cache owner didn't do that, but maybe in the future, right? Might still another puzzle coming out. But if you see that, and you try to solve it, you will end up with negative numbers right away because the 4,000 number is smaller than the 5,000 number. And especially here when we get into the 9,000, it doesn't work. Because this is kind of like the equation that you try to solve, right? The top number minus this number will give you a number ABCD. And then from that one, you have to subtract 9,000. Well, clearly, it's not going to work. You will get negative numbers all over the place. However, from the previous puzzle, we learned something. We learned that Tritemius cipher, right? Well, what if we, instead of on the outcome, we put it on the incoming parts? So we're going to take these numbers and we're going to apply the cipher. So this is all the numbers that were from the board, from the pyramid. This was the fixed key from the Tritemius cipher. And now we're going to apply that. So 4 minus 0 is 4, 2 minus 1 is 1, 0, so 10 minus 2 is 8, and so on. So we basically get, and I calculated the first parts for you. So here 11 minus 9 is 2, and so on. And now we have the first 3 numbers, and let's see if this works. So the original equation that we had on the other page was this, right? So the top number minus the number from the second row equals ABCD minus 9112, which would give us negative numbers. But the new numbers, 4185 minus 1888, gives us, well, a number somewhere in the 2000s, right? Minus 1211, that would give us somewhere around like 700 or 800. No negative numbers. And that is the key to solving this puzzle, is to apply exactly that to the pyramid, where you use this cipher. So the cache owner has taught us something new. We don't only have to look at the outcome, but we also have to look at the board itself and see maybe if we need to apply a cipher. Maybe that will become useful later on. Let's look at the next one, number 8. So we have here the Roman number 8. The posted coordinates are, in this case, in the 35 range, so the high 35s. And it talks about here about there's two individuals in the United States with their own zip codes. You will need one of these zip codes. Well, we just learned a cipher technique, right? The Timius cipher, which has a fixed um, keyword or cipher code. Now we're told to use a specific other ones. So this starts with a Google, and I'll be fair, I got put this one, the two individuals, put me a little bit on the wrong track because the first thing that I found was um, that there is two individuals with the same thing. Now, I'm going to tell you here that the first number, if you do this, that the number here is a 44. So, and the second number is a 69 that you will calculate if you do the entire pyramid. So, not something that we're looking for. If I take these two numbers and I try to apply them, it didn't work. Because this is what I found with Google. There's two people that have their own zip code, the POTUS and the FLOTUS. They have their own individuals that have their own. But it's an extended zip code, not a plain zip code, because they're actually within the same area. So there's actually a different zip code that is also assigned to a single person. And you have to do a little bit deeper search, but you'll find out that Smokey the Bear has its own one, 20252. And this one works a lot better. But let's take a look at the math first. I had those two numbers that I gave you at the end, the 44 and the 69. And when I first did it, it didn't seem to work. But when I used this Smokey the Bear, we actually see maybe a pattern. Because 4 minus 2, well, it would give 2, right? So one lower. 4 minus 0 gives 4. 6 minus also gives a 4. So we get 2, 4, 4. But we're looking for 3, 5, 5. They're each time one higher. Something weird is going on. Why is it off by 1 all the time? Well, again, either intentionally or unintentionally, the cache owner taught us this technique as well in another puzzle. One of the puzzles is called Digital Vigineer, where he talks about a technique where if you have two numbers, you can kind of calculate and rotate the numbers around. So he shows that right here, if you have a 6 and a 6, and then you can look it up. If you encode that, you will get the 1. So the keyword and the ciphertext will encode you to a new number. And so it's kind of like a shift cipher again, where you have one number, you shift it by a certain, and in this case, the 1 kind of functions like the A of a Vigineer cipher. So the 1 doesn't rotate anything, the 2 rotates everything by 1, the 3 rotates everything by 2, and so on, and where the 0 rotates everything by 9. Well, you already maybe when I hear me say that, you see that there's always one off. The 1 rotates by 0. The 2 rotates by 1. So this is that one difference that we talked about. This is actually the cipher that was used. So in other words, if we take these numbers, and so we look up the 2 in row 2, and we look up where the 4 is located, so the 2, then we see that it is at position 3. So the outcome is a 3. The same with the 0. We look at the row with the 0. We look at where the 4 is located, and we find the number 5 here at the top. And so this is the cipher that is used. But what I always ended up doing was just saying 4 minus 2 plus 1. So 4 minus 2 is 2, plus 1 is 3. 9 minus 5 would be 4, plus 1. So the question mark here would become another 5. And so on. And so now you can solve pyramid number 8 by the lesson that you learned or the technique that you learned from another cache page, from another puzzle. So with a lot of puzzles, the more you learn, the more you know, the more puzzles you can solve. But the CO's puzzles are always a great place to start to learn new techniques because they might be used again, as you see right here. Okay, so now look at the next one. So next one has indeed the numbers here, talks about the White House zip code. Well, we already know what that's supposed to be, right? We figured it out from an earlier one in the series. We also might notice a problem right away. There's actually two. One is that this number is higher than this number. That will almost always put us into trouble. Um, and so if you start solving this puzzle, you will end up with negative numbers again, which we learned from a previous puzzle is not the idea. There's also here the O. In this case, you should interpret that as a 0. I think it might have been a typo or it might be intentional to put some attention to that. But this gives also a way that most likely this 0 would not be necessary unless you had to do something with this. And this is where that same technique that we did before, the digital visioneer, together with another technique that we learned, which was sometimes we have to apply the cipher to the board, not to the destination. So let's do both those things. So we take all the numbers, so just in order, and I put them here on order on the page. We take that president zip code that we learned from another puzzle, and we take the digital visioneer, which we learned from another puzzle. So same technique, the 3, and then we find, sorry, the 2, and we find where the 3 is, and we get a 2 as an outcome. And so we go to the next one, which is the 0 row. We find where the 9 is, and we get a 0. Or you use the technique, how I calculated it all was 3 minus 2 plus 1 is 2. 9 minus 0, of course, is 9. Plus 1 would be 10, so we take the 0. 6 minus 5 is 1, plus 1 is 2, and so on. And now we start doing the puzzle with these numbers, and you will find out that at the end you will get a very nice looking set of numbers that will help you solve this puzzle. So we've completed number 9. Let's take a look at the last one. So with the last one is kind of like the finale to the series, right? And we see all kinds of trouble here. These numbers are not correct. Also at the end we are here with a 17, which of course nowhere fits near the coordinate that we're looking for. So here it's really that you have to combine everything we've learned before. We've learned about the different ciphers. We've learned about applying them to the board. We've learned about applying them to the end result. We've also learned that we might not always have to read it in a certain direction. And that is what you have to do for this puzzle. You have to combine all those techniques. I'm not going to tell too much more, but there is an additional hint on this page on what number to use. I didn't solve it that way, I'll be honest. I only reverse engineered it, what needed to be done. I first solved the pyramid with the correct number, and then later on found out why that number was used. But to do that, you will then solve this pyramid, and now you've solved the finale of the series. So I left the last one purposely a little bit in the dark. Yeah, see if you can figure it out, the whole series, see if you solved it. Many thanks to History Joe for allowing me to use his series and his caches for this video. I think it was a great example of how the cache owner can teach you new things, right? Teach you new techniques, but especially techniques for their puzzles. If you enjoyed the video, please like the video. That will help other people find it, and subscribe for more videos in the future. If you want to contact me, feel free to leave a comment, or you can contact me on the geocaching.com website. I'm known as by Waterfan5, or you can email me as well at the email address listed below. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time listening, and hope that you will listen the next time. Thank you.